says, "Go to Nineveh, that great city, and call out against it, for their evil has come up before me." But Jonah rose to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. He went down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish. So he paid the fare and went down into it to go with them to Tarshish, away from the presence of the Lord. But the Lord hurled a great wind upon the sea, and there was a mighty tempest on the sea, so that the ship threatened to break up. It's interesting because many of us, we don't realize that this is actually an amazing story of the love of God. And what we're going to see this morning, we're going to see two ways that God chases those he loves, and then two consequences of that pursuit. God pursues the ones he loves, and that has radical consequences for how he lives. And the first way God pursues Jonah is by sending a storm. Who said storm? Was it Christina? Yeah? See? Okay. Storm, another word. I need 3 volunteers to help me as I tell the story. Right, has anyone put their hands up? Will wants to volunteer. Okay. I would like you a bit spread out, so let's have one here. Joshua, your hand did go up first. There you go, James. And then Will, you can have the last one then. Okay, here's what you have to do. You have to keep the tambourine as still as possible, okay? It can't make a noise until I say the word storm. And when I say the word storm, just for 2 seconds, you need to shake the tambourines as much as possible, okay? So let's practice that. One day, over Ilford, there was a storm. Bit long, Will. Come on, raise your game. Okay. The story of Jonah begins with God telling Jonah, "I want you to go to Nineveh." Nineveh is east of where Jonah is. He's got to go in one direction, hundreds of miles to get to this town. Jonah doesn't want to do it. The reason why will become clear in the coming weeks, so I'd encourage you to come along every Sunday for the series. You don't want to miss out. Jonah gets in a boat and goes west, aims for Tarshish, which is 3,000 miles in the wrong direction. Jonah runs away from God. Hands up if you've ever run away from God. Yeah, most of you. Well done for your honesty. This is a place where we don't have to wear masks coming to church. We're all messed up here. We all make mistakes, and we can all confess we've all run from God. And so Jonah runs. What does God do when we run from him? Does he leave us to run and get on with life? Does he let us go and he'll find someone else to do it? He doesn't need Jonah. What does God do? He pursues us, and he sends a storm. 1, 2, 3. Well remembered. He sends a storm. Excellent. Sometimes, in order for God to chase us, he needs to send a bit of a storm. A few weeks ago, we had a fire alarm here at church. Might have been a surprise to some of you. How many of you, when a fire alarm happens, you like the noise the bell makes? Hands up if you like that noise. I think we have some liars on the front row as well as people who run from God. How many of you don't like the noise? It's piercing, isn't it? It's loud, it wakes you up, it gives you ringing in your ears for days on end. But I think we can all say that the noise is preferable to being locked in a building that's on fire, right? We are happy with the alarm because it takes us away from the fire. Here's what God does when he sends a storm. God is ringing an alarm bell in our life. Well done. Not you. When God sends a storm, it's this alarm bell ringing in our ears that something is up. Sometimes when we face a storm, it is God trying to get our attention. God sending the rain, sending the lightning, chasing us. Why? Because he loves us. But that's not the only thing God does. I need one more volunteer. Okay. Go on then, Reuben, your hand was up first. You need to hold these. You need to hold the strap and not touch the metal, okay? And then if you hit them together, that's cool. Now just do your left hand up and down and hit the other one. Not just by itself. Hit the other one, yeah, like that again. Okay, so God sends a storm, but that's not all that God does. We're going to have another S word. Sometimes God sends surprises. When I say the word surprise, that is your key, Reuben. Jonah is on this ship, and he's with all these sailors who don't know the Lord, and he is fleeing from the presence of God. We've already had the storm come, but that wasn't enough to make Jonah jump off the ship and swim back. In fact, he stays on and he keeps going. And so God has some other things in store. What happens is there's a bit of a surprise on the ship. The people all cast lots. How many of you know what that means, casting lots? Anyone want to explain? Tanya? Gambling. Kind of, yeah. They all draw straws. You've heard the phrase draw straws? There's one short straw and the rest of them are long. And they do the equivalent of handing these all out on the ship. And whoever pulls the short straw, it was their fault that all this is happening. Jonah pulls the short straw. What a surprise. Thank you, guys. Surprise, Reuben. Jonah pulls the short straw, but that's not the only surprise. Because what happens? Jonah is then thrown into the sea, and is he left there? No. A big ship, a big fish, a whale, a massive sea creature comes and swallows him up. This is a basking shark on the screen. I wonder if this would have been something like, it looks like you can probably fit in there quite well. It's another big surprise to the story. Sometimes when God chases us, we just need to be shaken out of the running that we are doing. I remember when I was at Bible college, I had a number of weeks where I really questioned whether or not I was called to ministry. And I remember one of these weeks in particular, studying this book has reminded me of it. Because what happened was, I spent all week telling people, I shouldn't be a pastor, I need to go do something else for 30 years. People don't go into ministry when they're 20, I need to wait until I'm older. And 2 times in 7 days, different people called me Jonah. People said to you, well, you sound like Jonah to me. And then a few days later, you sound a bit like Jonah, sound like you're running from God. God had to surprise me. He had to shake me to stop me chasing him. And so God loves Jonah so much that he doesn't just let him run off in the other direction. He chases him. He sends a storm. He sends these surprises. And Jonah is chased by the living God. And there are 2 consequences of this chasing. The first is salvation. Now, when I say the word salvation, this is where Martin comes in. There you go. Excellent. When I say the word salvation, we're going to get a bit of organ recital from Martin, okay? A bit of hallelujah. Feel free to sing along if you want. So God pursues us, but the consequence of this is salvation. Excellent. Here's the amazing thing. Even when we run away from God, it cannot stop his plans for us. Do you know what happens on this ship when Jonah draws the short straw? I didn't say surprise, did I, Reuben? Come on. Do you know? Oh, I did say storm. Okay. Do you know what happens to these guys on the ship? They worship the Lord. These people who worship loads of different gods, because of what happens with Jonah, because when they throw him off, the storm stops, these people end up worshiping God. Isn't it amazing to think that if Jonah hadn't run from God, what would have happened to these sailors? There are amazing verses in the Bible where, for example, Joseph says, what you intended for harm, God intended for good, the saving of many lives. Where Paul says that God works all things together for good for those who love him. Jonah runs from God and it ends up in people's salvation. But that's not the only consequence. You see, not only does God chase with the storm, not only does God send some surprises Jonah's way, not only does this bring about salvation, but perhaps the best thing of all is that Jonah is given a second chance. In chapter 3, this is what God says to Jonah. Then the word of the Lord, Jonah has ran from God, he's been in the ship, he's been thrown off the ship, he's been eaten by this massive fish, he's been spat back out on dry land. Then the word of the Lord came to Jonah the second time, saying, arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and call out against it the message that I tell you. You see, some of us, we keep running because we think God is going to punish us. Some of us, we keep running because we don't want to end up in God's bad books. We can't pluck up the courage to say to him, I've been running from you. But for us to stop running is for us to be given a second chance, a third chance, another go at it. God restores the years that the locusts have eaten. And no matter how long you have been running away from God for, you can come back right now to a happy God who loves you. A happy God who can cast your sin as far as the east is from the west. We have an amazing, amazing picture of this in Matthew. In Matthew, all the people come to Jesus and they say to him, we want a sign. We want to know that you are God. Send us a sign. What does Jesus say to them? He says, no sign will be given but the sign of Jonah. For just as Jonah was in the belly of the deep, the belly of the sea for 3 days and 3 nights, so the Son of Man will be in the belly of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights. You see, Jesus is saying this sign of Jonah where he pursued someone to the point of death and gave him new life, gave him a second chance. That is what you're going to see in me, and that is what you are going to have the opportunity to be a part of as well. And when Jesus died on the cross, that was an amazing example of the fact that no matter how much far we run from God, no matter how far we run in one direction, he will never stop chasing us. He will work out salvation. And he will give every single one of us a second chance. So in light of that, we're going to come to communion. Because communion is an amazing opportunity for us to remember that we are given a second chance, a third chance, a fourth chance. That Jesus was in the belly of the earth for 3 days in order that we might have salvation be seen around us. That was good. And in order that we might be forgiven time and time again for all the days, all the hours that we spend running from God.